We started the the seventh chapter on the Sphira of Tiferet, and the what we've seen so far, just a quick review, is that Tiferet, as we discussed, is associated with Yaakov, and Yaakov is Torah. So Tiferet and the Tikkunei Tiferet has to do with repairing and rectifying things that have to do with Torah. Insofar as Tiferet comes from Chesed and Devorah, which is right and left, Tiferet is kind of the balance of the two, and it represents the wisdom of that balance. So that Avraham Avinu certainly had Chokhmah Torah, and Avraham, being from Hesed, comes underneath Chokhmah. Yitzchak has the Gevurah, the ability to exercise over oneself and in a positive way over the world, control, which means making distinctions, differentiations, which is appropriate for Gevurah, which is underneath Bina. But Tiferet is the product of the two, the merging of the two. And therefore what he's saying here is that to the extent to which a person acts according to the Torah and acts in a way which is appropriate to Torah, then he's going to cause an influence of Torah through Tiferet to come down into the world. And to the extent to which he doesn't do that, he'll cause actually Tiferet to remove itself and inhibit that flow. So he spoke, for example, about the importance of humility in Torah study. A person who is arrogant and haughty about his Torah knowledge is actually going to be causing Tiferet to become elevated and haughty, as it were, as well. God says, if my Torah is being treated by Torah scholars in a way which is going to promote their arrogance and their pride, then I'm going to take it back. And the result is that Tiferet is withdrawn, pulled back away from Malchus. And therefore there's a lack of Shefa from the world. However, if a Torah scholar is acting as he's supposed to, with humility, sharing his Torah with others, as we mentioned, comparing himself to a desert, to a midbar, which is a hefker and accessible to all, so then what he's actually doing is he's initiating that flow to come down like water. It goes from a high place to a low place. These are the general ideas that we were talking about yesterday. And there was one other point where we were discussing, which is that the relationship between Tiferet and Malchus, as masculine to feminine, is like the relationship between Torah Shebichtav and Torah Shebal Peh, where Tiferet is Torah Shebichtav. It is the masculine. It is the inception of the wisdom, whereas Torah Shebal Peh is the delineation, the distinction. It is the definition of that Torah. So that Torah gives, for example, ideas or laws or halachas, but they're only properly, fully developed and executed and expressed in the realm of Torah Shebal Peh, which corresponds to the Malchus. Okay, which corresponds to the Malchus. Somebody pointed out that Netzach and Hod are also aspects of Torah, and what that person said is relevant. We'll see more as we go along. But the basic structure that the author is using now is Torah Shebichtav is Tiferet, and Torah Shebal Peh, the Torah Shebal Peh, is Malchus. So let's see then. What he said was that therefore the three spheros below Tiferet are going to be Netzach and Hod, which are one level, and then Yesod, which is a second level, and then Malchus, which is the third level. So that the way a person acts in Torah, which is Tiferet, is going to have an effect on these three planes. Netzach and Hod being one, Yesod being another, and Malchus being the third. And that's what he next delineates here then. On Samach Beis, second paragraph, the one starting with the word Rishona. So the Rishona, the first of these three manifestations of Tiferet is HaMisgae al Talmidav, a Torah scholar who is arrogant and oppressive over his students. Sometimes you see, or you've been in a class, or you hear a rabbi who seems to be lording his Torah knowledge over the students. And if they disagree, or offer a different opinion, or ask a question, right, he might bellow forth an opposition. And more often than not, the rabbi probably doesn't mean that in an arrogant way, but it is possible that he does. But more often than not, he probably doesn't. It's just coming out of maybe an overzealous intention to safeguard the truth of the Torah, what he perceives to be the truth of the Torah. But still, it comes off to the students as being something which is frightening, something which is intimidating, something which is, right, either maybe insensitive, inflexible. And there's a drawback to that, because then there's going to be a problem with the transmission. On the one hand, the rabbi is pounding forth the message, but it's in a way where the students are intimidated and don't have a proper opportunity to really understand what's being said. So they might not accept it, or they might accept it on their own terms, or they might misunderstand it. And as a result of that, the whole learning process is going to be negatively affected. And therefore, he says one of the very important things of a Torah scholar is, and one of the negative effects that can come out of being haughty in Torah study, in teaching of Torah, is a mizgai al talmidav, gorem shetiferes yizgae. He causes Tiferes, which is the giver of the Torah, as we said, down to the recipients. V'yis'ale ma'al netzach v'hod. He's going to cause the Tiferes to become elevated above Netzach and Hod. And who are Netzach and Hod? Netzach and Hod are called the Limudei Hashem. Those who learn from Hashem, meaning they learn the Torah from Hashem, meaning they receive from Tiferes. So that Netzach and Hod, according to this way of looking at it, correspond to Talmidim. Somebody who is a Torah scholar and a teacher of Torah, and he's therefore in the position of Tiferes because he is a giver of Torah, he's being mashpia Torah, but he does it in a way which is haughty and arrogant, and therefore prevents the Torah from actually coming down to the recipients, which are going to be Netzach and Hod. What he's going to cause is the sphere of Tiferes to become elevated above the spheres of Netzach and Hod, and that causes a severing, right, to a certain extent, of the shefa coming from Tiferes and Netzach and Hod. That's a very bad thing. And who are these? Shem Lumidei Hashem. That's Talmidei Tiferes, the students of Tiferes. That's Netzach and Hod, meaning the recipients from Tiferes. However, the opposite of that is V'amashpil atzmo u'melamda ba'ava. But a person who humbles himself and he teaches the Torah out of love, where we said that love, ahava, is related to the root hav, which means to give. So that when he's teaching Torah, he's not taking the honor and the grandeur and the glory and the respect and the recognition for himself, because that's what Gaiva does. That's Gvura, right? He's taking all of that power of Torah for himself. He might be teaching Torah, but he's not really giving. What he's doing through teaching Torah is taking. He's taking from the students, a sense of pride, of self-fulfillment, of power, of influence, right, and all of these things. So a person can be in a position of learning Torah, but he's very far from the truth of the Torah. Where what he's saying here is that when a person teaches Torah, what he should be really thinking about doing in the love of Torah. And ahava is based on hav, which means giving. So the Chaver is doing this, he's interested in giving the Torah, not taking from the students, but giving to the students. If he's interested in giving to the students, then he wants to make sure that what he's doing is really giving. Are you sure you understand? Anybody have any questions? Is that clear? Yes. Can I speak about it another way? The rabbi will constantly be thinking in his mind how he can make sure that everybody's on the same page.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah? Is this clear? Anybody have any objections to it? Or if somebody raises a question or an objection, he's humble enough to listen to what the person's saying. Maybe the person's not right. Maybe the person is right. Maybe the person's saying something which would require the rabbi to qualify something that he said, and he shouldn't be embarrassed to admit that he's wrong. On the contrary, the sages say, in the name of one of the sages says, I've learned very much from my rabbis, even more from my colleagues, and the most from my students. So that a person who's truly interested in teaching Torah, because he loves the Torah, is going to want to be giving the Torah, and therefore he's not at all embarrassed to accept the possibility that he might be wrong, or that what he said might need to be qualified. Why? Because that's his job. As a teacher, he learns the most from his students. So as a teacher, right, he should really be viewing himself as a student. And since he views himself as a student, he has no problem with listening what his rabbis, the students, have to say. They're his rabbis, aren't they? They're teaching him Torah. No, isn't that the way it should be, Mordechai?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
I think Rabbi Nachman talks about that. He said, I'm going to make students that make students.
Make students that make students.
Students making students.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Very good. Very good. Yeah, and yeah, and part of that is this idea as well, is that really I'm going to make myself a student to my students. So this way, right? It's going to be much more likely that the Torah which he loves is going to be given ba'ahava, where ahava means giving. Have. He's actually giving over Torah. Somebody who humbles himself and teaches the Torah ba'ahava, which means love, which is based on giving. The result of that is going to be that the sphere of Tiferes is also going to lower itself el talmidav, to its students who are netzach and hod, v'yashpi'em, and give them the shefa that should go from Tiferes to netzach and hod. Lefichach hiyeh adam noyach letalmidav. A person should be easy with his students, should be comfortable with them, should be easygoing with them. V'yalamdem kasher yuchlu notses, and teach them according to what they can grasp. Very good. Because again, if a person is teaching because he wants to take, so it really doesn't matter whether the students understand or not. Because really what he's getting out of this is not that they understand, but that they're impressed with how much he knows. And therefore, he can very easily fall into the rut of saying things which people are not going to be able to understand. And on the contrary, the higher it is, right, the more impressive it sounds, the more he gets out of it. So he has no compunctions about learning in a way which is just going to confuse people and get them. And he might look at people and they're like, not getting it, but he doesn't care. It's just a soliloquy anyway. He's talking with himself. He's, like talking in the mirror. The main thing is that people are like, wow, he really knows a lot, because nobody understood anything. Great, okay. So what worth is it that he knows all of that if nobody understood what he's saying? So sometimes you have to try and engage your audience, right? You have to. You want the act of teaching to be something challenging and fulfilling for yourself. It's true, but even if it's not that, of course, it's not for yourself. It's for giving to others. Now, if the level of the audience is such that you can up the notch, from a Rashi, to a simple reading of Rashi, to a tifa diuk in Rashi, so that's great. If you can go from a tifa diuk in Rashi to a Tosfos, that's great, right? We have to go beyond. But if you're talking about Tosfos, where people didn't even get the Rashi, and the main thing is just that it sound like this is impressive, so that would be the wrong thing. So you have to be able to kind of go up and down accordingly in order to make sure that the people that, and sometimes it means, even if it means oversimplifying it. You might be giving a class, and you have to make sure, we have to work hard to make sure everybody gets it just according to the simple reading of the Gemara, right? So you might be speaking in a way where you know that this actually doesn't quite fit in with Tosfos, and there's a difficulty with this, but you have to leave that. You have to leave that. Just leave it, because this is where everybody's holding, or this is where most people are holding. You might throw out a point, for further research for the people who are maybe a little more ahead, a little more advanced, or a little more able for that. Yeah, but you have to be able to gauge yourself, and therefore, it would be inappropriate to put too much on a student, more than he can receive, particularly if it's coming from a point of arrogance, which therefore is about not so much whether they understand or not, but how impressed are they with what I'm saying. Rachmanis. So a person has to be very careful about this. V'tiferes b'schuso yashpia b'limudei Hashem kefi b'chinosam haruya alehem. And therefore, Tiferes, the sphere of Tiferes, in the merit of this Torah scholar who's teaching, sharing Torah in this way, Yashpia b'limudei Hashem will therefore also, as a result, be mashpia, influence the limudei Hashem, which are the students of Tiferes, which are Netzach and Hod. It will be mashpia him kefi b'chinosam ha'uriya lehem, in a way, in a degree, which is appropriate for them. Okay, so that's the first thing then. The expression of humility in Torah vis-a-vis students, and the effect that has on the relationship between Tiferes and the first tier of spheres below Tiferes, which are Netzach and Hod. The next one, Shenis. What was that?
Also, there's a certain fear between a Rebbe and a student. Supposed to be a certain in Torah,
Yeah,
certain year.
yeah. So yeah, I didn't really emphasize or address that point. It's true that that there should be a certain degree of fear, by which you mean to say awe or respect. Yeah. On the other hand, personally, it's my opinion that
Love is higher than fear.
yeah. But if there's a certain degree of, let's say, fear, meaning awe or respect, so it might have the effect of the students kind of arbitrarily or objectively accepting what the rabbi says without necessarily feeling they understand it. On the other hand, it's my feeling that, although I might be wrong, but it seems to me that that a person could actually gain a more genuine degree of respect if he demonstrates that he's really interested in the students and is humble with them. But that might be wrong. Maybe there might be certain personalities that take advantage of that type of thing and act disrespectful or make an attempt to show that the rabbi's wrong, because they know in the end of the day the rabbi's probably going to maybe entertain this suggestion more than he should. So he'll take advantage of pressing a point in order to save face and not look like he's wrong. You know, I mean, you could have all types of dynamics. So it's true. I mean, a rabbi who wants to be effective probably has to find a proper balance, just like Tiferet is balanced between chesed and Devorah. On the one hand, giving; on the other hand, strength. So I think that, you know, generally a person should act in a way, like he's saying here, of humility towards the students, but it might be appropriate sometimes to assert his authority if he feels that somebody's abusing the system, for example. Yeah. But generally speaking, I think if the rabbi is open and wants to have discussions in Torah which are conducive to sharing and hearing each other's ideas and responses, so that people will generally respect that person more than somebody who's kind of maintaining a distance. I can say personally from my relationship with my own rabbis, the rabbis who I felt were like more interested in maintaining a distance between themselves and the students, and remaining somewhat aloof and acting in a way which kind of demands, even if the students kind of go along with that. Personally, I never felt that I could connect so well with such a rabbi, such a personality, and that would affect my relationship with that person in the short term and the long term, and ultimately not, for me, make that person the one that I would want to consult for things having to do with Torah beyond just learning the information in the book. Whereas the rabbis who I felt were more humble, were more, let's say, fluid, more open to tolerate the different opinions, different approaches, and so on, were the rabbis that I would feel most comfortable with, able to discuss the Torah at hand with, have a relationship with in the short term and the long term, and ultimately consult about matters of Torah not only pertaining to the text, but life. So, but again, it could just be a personal thing. It's like, yesterday I was asked to speak to a group, and the rabbi came in a joking, kind of jovial way, and said, you know, in a very loud voice, "Rabbi, I want you to shout at these guys and keep them awake. I know from personal experience, if you don't shout at them, and they're going to fall asleep, and you know, in front of all the guys, you know." He was joking, of course, but that's not my style. You guys know that's not my style, you know. So I said, "Rabbi, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you know, I speak in a mellow way. I hope I don't put anybody to sleep, but you know, I can't do that." So after the rabbi left, I said, "Did you guys really want me to speak that way?" I'm like, "No." So I don't know, you know, the guy, maybe the rabbi was just telling a joke, you know, he was just being, you know, jovial or whatever, and
he was trying to wake them up.
Yeah. But what's that? It could be that's his style. But I'm just saying, you know, different strokes for different folks, you know. In any case, I think we're up to the second section here on page Samach Gimel. Shenis. Hamisgaye b'toroso al ha'oni. The second tier has to do with a Torah scholar acting haughtily with the poor person. Umevazi also, and he disparages him. Kahu de Eliyahu, like that particular story regarding Eliyahu Navi. Shenidme leRabbi Shimon ben Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Ka'ani mechuar, nivze v'nimas, lachshiloi, shezach adata alav, v'gino esa'ani, v'ochiach al panav mumo. That's the Gemara in Tainis, which I had mentioned generally yesterday, where this Rav Shimon ben Elazar was going on a way into a particular town after having spent years of dedicating himself to Torah study, and he was feeling a bit full of himself, having learned so much Torah while he was away. And in order to chastise him, God sent Eliyahu Navi in the form of an ugly old man who appeared in his way. And the rabbi said to him something like, if you're from this town, is everybody in this town as ugly as you are? Which is a mean, nasty thing to say. And Eliyahu Navi, in the form of this old kind of poor person, said to him, I don't know, but if you have a complaint about the way I look, so address your complaint to the one who made me. And at that point, the rabbi realized that what he said was wrong, and he asked forgiveness. But since he had said something like, is everybody in the town as ugly as you are, he said, I'm not going to forgive you until you ask for my forgiveness in front of everybody in the town.
Maybe this rabbi,
Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar.
yeah, maybe he was high. If the learning, he was a very, I guess he get too high.
Arrogant.
Yeah.
He said haughty.
He said, I say high, he said arrogant.
Yeah, it said the Gemara says Zacha. Yes, the Gemara says right, Zocha lav daito. I translated as he came full of himself. So I went short of saying that he was arrogant, but he was full of himself. He was feeling quite good about. But you have it's good to feel good about learning the much Torah. But you can't be you can't let the fact that you're now spiritually elevated to put you up as if you're on a high horse over everybody else. Yeah. Yes, and that's why he's saying here the second aspect of becoming elevated in Torah is the possibility of the pitfall of becoming arrogant over the poor. The first case is becoming arrogant over one's students. The second case is arrogant over the poor. And this was the story that happened here. He saw this old ugly man, and he disparaged him until he was forced to humble himself before Eliyahu Navi and ask for his forgiveness in front of all the people in the town. Somebody who is a Torah scholar, who is arrogant at the expense of the poor and the downtrodden, he's going to cause in the spiritual realm, the sphere of Tiferet, to become elevated above Yesod. Now he's affecting the second tier, right? The first one was the relationship between Tiferet and the students of Netzach and Yehod, between Netzach and Hod. And now he's gone to the second tier, the relationship between Tiferet and Yesod, where Yesod is an Oni. Yesod means foundation, and in this case, is compared to the Oni, the poor person. Remember, in the section regarding Chesed, we spoke about how in the different forms of Chesed, a person has to do Chesed with the Oni, and with the Ger, and with the Almana. And in that context, he spoke about how the Oni and the Ger can be referring to Yesod and Malchus. Yes. What's that? The poor person.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So that here also we find that the Yesod is being compared to the poor person. Why? Like I said to that person yesterday, I mean, sometimes these things are interchangeable. There's different ways of looking at it. But insofar as Oni, like Malchus, receives from all of the upper spheros, so everything that it has, it receives from others. So it's like a type of Anim. Yeah. And therefore both Yesod and Malchus can be understood to be referring to Anim, the poor, the two, plural, Yesod and Malchus. So therefore, a person who, because of his Torah study, feels that he's somehow elevated above the simple poor folk, he's actually going to be severing the relationship between Tiferet and Yesod, which is a bad thing. V'lo yashpia bo, And likewise, Tiferet will not give to Netzach and Hod, nor will it give down to Yesod. Vim tiyeh dato shel chacham miyusheves alav im ha'ani. However, if the wise person, the Torah scholar's mind will be at ease and be kind of intermingled with the mindset of the poor people, then he's going to cause Tiferet to be mashpia to Yesod, which is going to be a very good thing. And so, for example, this morning we spoke a bit about the famous story with Rabbi Akiva and how he did not start learning Torah until the age of 40, at which time he was an ignoramus, he was Am Haaretz, he didn't even know the Aleph base, and he was basically proposed to by Rachel, the daughter of Kalva Savua, the very wealthy Jewish landowner who Rabbi Akiva worked for as a hired hand on his estate. And even though he was old, over the hill, and Jewishly uneducated, this young daughter of the wealthy Kalva Savua took an interest in him because she saw that he had the inner makings of a great tzaddik, of a great Talmid Chacham, which he ultimately did become. But Tosfos points out there, something we didn't discuss this morning, that this seems to contradict what the Talmud says about Rabbi Akiva elsewhere. In fact, it contradicts what Rabbi Akiva said about himself elsewhere, where Rabbi Akiva, after he became a rabbi, referring to those earlier days in his life when he was 40, when he was an ignoramus, that he would say, "Who will bring me a Torah scholar and let me chomp into him like a donkey would rip into somebody's shoulder?" Yeah. So Tosfos asks, this is the humble, modest, gentle person that Rachel saw had the potential to become a Rabbi Akiva. He said about himself this vicious description that he would have ripped into a Talmid Chacham like an ornery donkey would latch its teeth into somebody. Yeah. So what's that all about? So either I saw once written, or perhaps I thought to myself of way hated the Talmid Chachamim. Yeah. So what's that? So I had once an idea that the explanation is that the reason why Rabbi Akiva hated Talmidei Chachamim is because he was referring to a specific class of Talmidei Chachamim at that time who had aligned themselves with the Roman rulers that were trying to persecute the Jewish people. And these were some of the Torah scholars who tried to save their skin by attaching themselves to the authorities, the Roman authorities, and they used their position as official rabbis to save their skin and simultaneously oppress the people. And these were a class of Torah scholars that were very much hated by the people because they were false. They were false Torah scholars, and they what was the word I'm using? They capitalized upon their position as rabbis to make alliances with the Romans and save their skin at the Jewish populace's expense. And it was those types of rabbis that Akiva was so much opposed to, kind of like a spiritual Robin Hood who was interested in stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. He hated those rabbis because of his good character traits of wanting to champion the rights of the poor. And this is reminding me of that. The fact that there might be Torah scholars or a type or class of Torah scholars that would actually lord their power over the simple poor people and use that to exploit them. And this Rachel, in fact, whose father became indignant over the fact that she was interested in marrying Rabbi Akiva, and when she ultimately did, he disowned her. And she lived in a horse stall for 24 years, growing her hair in order to cut it and sell it for wigs. She was living in the most dire poverty because her father disowned her as a result of her marrying Rabbi Akiva. And this was after he made a wonderful shidduch for her. A young Torah scholar who was intelligent and witty and bright and wealthy and well-connected, and a rabbi who was exactly of the class of scholars that Rabbi Akiva
didn't like.
hated. And she was she was a real deal, this Rachel. She wasn't about to marry somebody because of the false type of Torah that was being exemplified by this particular class of rabbis. She was looking for the real deal, who was Rabbi Akiva, which is the real reason why he opposed this class of rabbis in the first place. So this is the type of thing that I think the author here is referring to. The phenomenon that Torah scholars might, because of their status and position and recognition in the community, come to lord themselves over the poor, simple people and exploit them in any number of ways. That would be a horrible thing. And the result would be, therefore, causing Tiferet to mistreat, as it were, the sphera of Yesod. Lefichach yichoshev ha'oni me'od etzel hachacham. Therefore, a poor person should be valued very much by the Torah scholar, v'ikaravehu, and he should make every effort to be mekarev him. V'chach yichoshev lamala yesod etzel tiferes v'yiska shebo. And in this way, the needs of Yesod will be considered very important by Tiferet, and Tiferet will therefore make an effort to tie itself to Yesod, and therefore be mishpia to Yesod, and that will have a very beneficial effect down below as well. So that's the second degree. Now let's see the third degree. Questions, comments? Yeah. Third degree. Huh?
As students, how do we try to strive for Tiferet?
So first of all, every student is also a rabbi, because what a person learns he can share with others. So in whatever context the student finds himself in a position where he's sharing his Torah with others, he can certainly apply this.
Got it.
Yeah. Another way that a student can be part of the process, even if he's not working on the level of Tiferet, but really more on the part of, let's say, Netzach or Hod, or of Yesod or Malchus, is to try and make himself a proper and attractive receptacle, right? So the relationship between, let's say, Tiferet and Netzach and Hod, or of Yesod or of Malchus, as we've said, is like the relationship between male, the giver, and the female, the recipient. And therefore, if a person is not in the position of Tiferet, the giver, but he wants to be an integral part of the process of having the Shefa come down through Tiferet of Torah into the rest of the spheros, then he can act as a proper receptacle, which would mean making himself, and I don't mean this to say in a derogatory way, right? But making himself as a female to attract the attention of the giver. So what does that mean for us as students? That means being kind, being respectful, being patient, listening, saying comments which are appropriate, refraining from saying comments which are not appropriate, or at times that they're appropriate and refraining from times when they're not appropriate, saying even good words of appreciation, for the time or the effort that the rabbi gives, or saying some word that demonstrates the person's appreciation. So acting in this way is going to be, what this is talking about, how Tiferet has to make itself available to be mashpia, and how the Torah scholar, by not doing so, would cause Tiferet to withdraw, or how his doing so would cause Tiferet to approach. Yeah, but the reciprocal side of that would be from our side as students, trying to adorn ourselves, make ourselves attractive to Tiferet. So Tiferet should want to come closer, establish a relationship of intimacy with us in order to give and impart within us, plant within us the seeds of Torah. That would be like the masculine imparting the seed of Torah within the feminine. A student that's haughty and arrogant, or abrasive, or argumentative, is going to turn off more often than not, it's going to turn off the rabbi from wanting to give. So he's going to address his attention elsewhere. Yeah, which is an example of just like water goes from a high place to a low place, so the Torah goes from a high to a low. So a rabbi is going to generally find himself directing the Torah that he has to give to somebody who he feels is going to receive it and going to appreciate it. And therefore, somebody who's acting arrogant, haughty, standoffish, or abrasive, or again, competitive. So naturally, in a classroom setting, or the rabbi is going to kind of like Yeah, naturally kind of, direct his attention from that place down somewhere, where it's going to be appreciated, where he knows it's going to be accepted. A good teacher, of course, would try to be aware of that and not do that, but rather he would try and use his Torah to soften up that place so that it will be received and at least filter downward, right, and do something. But not every person can do that all the times, and the natural inclination is going to be to deflect one's abilities and talents from that. Yeah, but of course, a good student a good sensitive giver is going to try and find an opportunity to diffuse that situation either within the classroom or outside, try and establish some personal contact, address what's wrong here, in order to diffuse that tension or that arrogance or that opposition, because he really wants to be able to give. Shlishis, the third. Hamizgae b'tarasoi al ama da'aro. Somebody who is arrogant with his Torah regarding amei ha'aratzois, right? The amaretz. So the first category was vis-a-vis students. The second was vis-a-vis the poor. The third one is vis-a-vis the amaretz. What's the difference between an amaretz and a poor person? Amaretz literally means a person of the land.
Somebody who's like a common secular.
He's not necessarily poor, but he's
secular person.
he's kind of the amaretz is generally a person who's not particularly observant. Yeah, he's not particularly observant, or he's not particularly meticulous about his observance. Amaretz is like a man of the land. He's an agriculturer. He's a farmer.
The field,
he's a person of the field. He's a farmer. So he works. He's an earthy person, uncouth. He doesn't have particular interest or sensitivity or an opportunity to learn Torah because So the term is generally referred to anybody who, for whatever their occupation might be, is kind of earthy and not particularly interested in Torah. So one person might say, look, I'm not going to be arrogant over my students because I understand it's an integral part of transmitting the Torah to be humble with the students. I'm not going to be arrogant over poor people either, because in the end of the day, just because they don't have money is not a reason to hold that against them. They're poor, but look, they're God-fearing and observant. But the Amei Haaretz, those people, they're coarse, earthy people who are more often than not against the Torah more than they are for it. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. No, that would also be wrong. Shlishis, hamizgaya b'Torah al da'ara, shehu kalal am Hashem. In the end of the day, these people are also included in being called the people of Hashem.
We're all Am Israel.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we're all Am Israel. And therefore, being haughty over these people for whatever reason is also wrong. And the result is, Gorem shetiferes yizgaim me'al malchus. He's going to cause Tiferes to be elevated and therefore separated from Malchus, v'lo yashpia ba, and will not influence Malchus. That seems to include the possibility that perhaps Tiferes would be mashpia on Netzach and Hod, and would be mashpia on Yesod, but not Malchus. What does that have to do with it? Once Tiferes has been mashpia to Netzach and Yehod, then it goes from Netzach and Yehod to Yesod, or from Yesod to Malchus. So how can Tiferes minimize its flow to Malchus? You've got Netzach and Hod and Yesod in between. So I don't know exactly the answer to this question, except that the degree of Shefa is tzimtzumed as it goes, so that a person might be mashpia to the point where after tzimtzum it reaches one level or even another level, but doesn't go beyond that. And therefore, a person who is haughty over the Amei Haaretz might nevertheless be causing a certain degree of Shefa Torah to come down, but it's not enough to actually get into Malchus and then go into the world. You see why he's connecting the Amei Haaretz to Malchus, because the Amei Haaretz is like, the Amei Haaretz are the people of the land, and that's what Malchus is. Malchus is like that final stop. Right? We spoke about how the spheros and the realm of the spheros are like an inverted tree, where the spheros are rooted into Malchus, and then, not rooted, it would go the other way around.
Yeah, the branches and the roots.
Yeah, well, actually, it would be. Yeah, that's generally how it goes. I mean, all the spheros would be like the roots of the tree, where the sustenance is being drawn from the spiritual realm down into the, right to the tree, which is Malchus, and then Malchus branches down into the world and sends that influence in the form of the trunk and branches and sub-branches and ultimately leaves and twigs and fruit. And those fruits are what reaches into this world. Okay? So that in a way, right, that Malchus is the land. That's the earth. The roots are underneath it, and the tree branches from outside of it. And that's the Amaretz, the Malchus. Shukal Am Hashem, that's the earth. Gorem shetiferes yizgaya el Malchus v'lo yashpia ba. Elo, rather a person should be in a scenario where dato me'oreves im habrios, his mindset is fluid, intermingled with other people. V'kol am yeshuv chashuvim lefonov, and all people, all inhabitants of the city, meaning everybody in society, should be important to him. Even the Amei Haaretz, they're also part of society. Because they are below in the mystery of the earth. What does he mean here? Like I said before, the Am Haaretz are like Malchus, which is like the earth. He says here in the note, Hainu Midas Malchus, Hanikras Eretz. That's corresponding to Midas Malchus, which is called Eretz, for the reason that I'm saying. Right? It's the point from which the Shefa comes down. And therefore, God forbid that a Torah scholar should set himself up against the Amei Haaretz and call them Chamorim. What is Chamorim? Chamor is a donkey. And Chamor also means materialism, like Chamor, like Chomer. And therefore, God forbid, the Torah scholar should become haughty and be arrogant over the Amei Haaretz by calling them like lowly, earthly, material, earthly, like donkeys, like mules. No, he says that's not the case. Why? Because even they have a role in the society of Klal Yisrael, and their role serves the function of Malchus, which is Eretz, which is why they're called Am Haaretz. And what's the role of Malchus? The Malchus receives the seed from the Spheros. It's seeded from the Shefa of the Spheros above it, and like the earth, it takes that seed, and then it causes the Shefa to sprout from it in the form of the tree, which then disseminates the fruit. So too, the Amei Haaretz receives his Shefa from the Talmidei Chachamim, from the people who are learning Torah. They then use that Shefa in the context of their relationship with the physical earth, and they therefore are the agents through which the spiritual Shefa is expressed into a material Shefa, and they bring forth food from the earth, which then goes back to the Talmidei Chachamim.
They say the brachas.
Yeah.
It's like a circle.
Yeah, so it becomes a circle. So therefore, he's saying, Has v'shalom, the Talmid Chacham should be misgaya and have arrogance and be haughty over the Amei Haaretz because of their connection to the earth, by calling them earthly and coarse. No, everybody has a role in Klal Yisrael. And there's a symbiotic relationship here. So that the Amei Haaretz, who are like the earth, are corresponding to the Malchus, which means they receive the seed of the Shefa that's generated from Tiferet, which comes from the Torah of the Torah scholars. And then that spiritual Shefa is translated via the earth of Malchus and via the earthliness of the Talmud of the Amei Haaretz into a physical manifestation of bounty, which then goes back to the Talmidei Chachamim. So if it weren't for the Amei Haaretz, the Shefa coming from the Talmidei Chachamim, which is Tiferet, wouldn't be expressed to the Malchus, which is the physical earth, and there's a bounty for the Talmidei Chachamim. And everybody has an important role here, therefore. Not everybody can be a Torah scholar. And those who are not, in the Amma Arts, also serving an important role. So we shouldn't disparage them. We're partners here in the cyclical process of translating spiritual shefa into material shefa. And he says here, on the top of Samech Daled, if a person does disparage the Amei Haaretz, who are like the Malchus, the result in the spiritual realm is he's going to throw them into the Klipos. And we're speaking about how the Klipos attach themselves to Malchus,
Right.
because they're trying to inhibit the Shefa from Malchus into the world. Remember, we spoke about in the context of the mitzvah of Chesed, doing circumcision on the baby, corresponding to peeling away the klipos around Malchus. Malchus corresponding to the part of the body where circumcision takes place. But a person who disparages these Amei Haaretz, which are like Malchus, is basically causing them to be drawn down into the dredges and succumbing them to being enveloped in the klipos. And the result of this is going to be l'chach lo yiske leven shiyeh bo or Torah. A Torah scholar who does this, therefore, will not himself merit to have children who are Torah scholars. Kedita Gemara, as it says in the Gemara in Nedarim asks, why is it that, generally speaking, Torah scholars don't have sons who are Torah scholars? Yeah, the reason is to show that a person shouldn't think, to humble them, because many Torah scholars come to become arrogant as the Torah and think that it's something which is hereditary. And the Gemara says that's not the case. It's not hereditary. Everybody can earn it. And on the contrary, people who are poor and don't have the same, and disprivileged, often have the power to, often gives them the strength to become the Torah that they would need to become Torah scholars. But in any case, the point here is very important, that a Torah scholar who puts the Amei Haaretz into the earth, has the result of causing them to be brought down into the klipos, so that Malchus becomes occluded with klipos. And since Malchus, which is the place of the bris milah, is associated with reproduction, if he causes this flow of productivity translated from the spiritual to the physical to become occluded with impure forces of klipos, the result is that his own productive energy is to become occluded with klipos, and his children will themselves not be Talmidei Chachamim, because he's brought a klip on his own Malchus. And therefore that's going to affect the quality of his children, and they're not going to be sensitive to Torah. Just like he was not sensitive enough to the role that the Amei Haaretz, which is Malchus, the role that plays in the proliferation of Torah.
It's so important to love everybody, right?
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. And you see from the Kabbalistic point of view how this is manifested mystically, metaphysically as well. It's a very important idea. He puts the Amei Haaretz, which is Malchus, into the Klippa, and as a result, his own Malchus is going to be subject to the Klippa, which means that his children are going to have a spiritual foreskin, which is going to make them desensitized to Torah, because he didn't properly respect the position of the Amei Haaretz, which is Malchus, in its role in the transmission of the Torah. And he included it with klipos, so his own children become included with klipos, severing the transmission of Torah through himself. He's like cutting himself off. Very deep, impressive idea. Okay, we'll have to stop here and continue B'ezrat Hashem next time we meet.